Hello, everybody. My name is Justin Swan. I'm the CEO of Cascade Community Foundation, and we want to welcome you to Community Q&A, the live stream. We are here today to have a little bit more fun than some of our previous conversations, and that's because we've got Grand Rapids Children's Museum with us and a couple of their amazing staff. First, I want to acknowledge our episode underwriter, United Bank. We're very appreciative of them joining us for supporting these important conversations that we're having. This past summer, Cascade Community Foundation was approached by a few people in the community that really encouraged us to be a vehicle for sparking conversations. This is a non-confrontational forum. It's non-political. It's completely judgment-free, and it's intended that way because we want this to be an opportunity for the community to come together, share resources, and dive into conversations that you ordinarily maybe not be having. You might not be having them at work, in your household. You may not be having them with your children even. And those are the things that we really want to start to dive a little bit deeper in, because we think it's important to have these deeper conversations in order to uplift the community entirely. Of course, race, diversity, ethnicity, they can be uneasy topics for many, but they don't necessarily have to be. I understand that race and ethnicity is a specific topic that can elicit emotions, and it can even trigger responses. If your intention is to debate right now, this is not going to be a forum for you. And it doesn't have to be, and that's okay. If, however, your intention is to grow, both as a parent, as a member of the community, as a caretaker, if it is to learn and to understand what it's like to be a person of color in this community, to understand what it's like for people of color to be in our community of Ada, Cascade, and Forest Hills, and you're watching because you're eagerly seeking activities, resources to introduce diversity to your children, then you are in the right place. This is education. This is a community resource. And I'm going to introduce our guests today, Natalie Hall and Maggie Lancaster from the Grand Rapids Children's Museum. Natalie, you're a resident of Ada yourself, and I'm really curious to know what your opinion is on programs like this, on Race in the Suburbs, which your amazing husband was a part of, and then also our efforts to expose parents to resources like this. Is there value in this?
I definitely think that there is value in it. Often what you find is that there are a lot of parents that don't know and don't really, know the way or the right way for them to go about it, looking for those resources. When my husband first told me that he was going to do the Race in the Suburbs conversation, I thought it was a great idea, but there was a little apprehension. My initial reaction was, is Ada ready for that conversation? Like, is this really, really going to happen? And what would it look like?
In our pre-interview, Natalie, you said something pretty revealing to me, and I'm paraphrasing here, but West Michigan is welcoming, but there isn't necessarily this feeling of belonging. And this, really makes perfect sense. Almost anyone watching has been in a situation where they start a new job or a new company or colleagues, and of course they're welcomed, but they don't always feel like they belong there. For you and Omar, for your children, what does West Michigan, Ada feel like? Is that different? Am I on the right track here?
So West Michigan in itself has been great for me and my family. I will say that. One thing that I always teach my children and that we firmly believe in is that you belong anywhere your feet are planted. And so that comment just kind of comes a little bit where most of my circle, if not all, they're transplants. We're not from West Michigan. When I first moved here, you kind of get the sense of what brought you here. You'll get those questions. What brought you to West Michigan? And I've found a lot of people that I've met that are not from here, whether they're in my transplant group or not, that have had a really hard time adjusting. For me, like I said, it's been great for us, but our circle, they are truly, all of us are transplants. We're not from West Michigan. So when I moved here, I didn't realize there was a whole, oh, you're from the east side,
Yeah.
Being from the east side of the state, it was just like, oh, there's Holland, there's Lansing, there's Grand Rapids, there's Wyoming. There was no, oh, that's a West Side only thing. And
Yeah,
so that to me is one of those where when you first move here, and like I said, it's not just me or people that look like me, it's not a race thing. There's just definitely a certain way that West Michigan can, make you feel very welcome, but you're still not a born and raised West Michigan, you know,
sure. Yep.
resident.
Yep.
So,
How about your kids? I'm curious about the general, and then we'll get to Maggie. But real quick,
sure.
your kids and their belong, because some of these things happen generationally. How do you find that their opinion may change on that?
Um, my kids, they're a little different because they started so late. We came here when my oldest was in the second grade. So, you're just a new kid at that time. There's not necessarily the where are you from, what city are you from and where did you come from? Um, they're they're good, I believe. I mean, there are some differences that have nothing to do with necessarily West Michigan. It has a lot to do with just when you are in a suburban environment as an African American and being one of few. I would say that's more of things that they have to deal with and be a part of versus the West Michigan, you're not from here. Because really all they know at this point is to grow up here and be a part of,
Sure.
where you're from. They didn't come here as an adult or out of college or as their first job. So it's very different for them.
I want to encourage people to go back into our YouTube channel, Cascade Community Foundation. Watch Race in the Suburbs. You'll see Natalie's husband Omar on there. He reveals some incredible things that are actually going to lead to future episodes that we're really excited about into 2021. Natalie, thanks for sharing that stuff. It's important for us to open up with a little bit deeper dialogue because I want people to get to know you and also to get to know Maggie. So with that cue, let's bring in Maggie Lancaster. She is the Chief Executive Officer of Play at the Grand Rapids Children's Museum. That's the best title I've ever heard of.
I mean, isn't that the best way to always start off? I am the CEO of Play. I mean, I just love it. I just love it. It's so fun. Thank you. Thanks.
You're not just the CEO of Play. You're a champion of Play. It's alluring because there's wonderful delivery system through a lot of things, but when you're delivering through something that's so natural, I think that's tremendous. So before we get into the amazing activities and the resources that you're going to share with us, for parents watching this right now, how might you encourage them to continue their efforts to introduce diversity to their children beyond what we're going to be doing?
Oh, thank you so much. And once again, thanks so much for having me and being able to get a little bit on my soapbox here. But, what is the definition of play? That's what I think we always need to start off with. And we're often, we forget that, it is essentially, engaging in an activity that's unstructured, that's more recreational rather than, for a purpose. And in playing a game, in using your imagination, in engaging without being, very serious, is sometimes thought of as being frivolous. And in fact, our mission statement never had the word play for a very long time because they felt that our founding mothers didn't think we would get funding. And so, I mean, that says a lot right there. But once we really get down to the bottom of what play is, you realize it is that social emotional learning through interactions with others. So sometimes it's quiet play, which can be chess. Sometimes it's loud play, which can be tag. Sometimes it's reading. Sometimes it's role playing. There's a lot to do with play when you really think about it, that is helping all of us, particularly in that diversity level that we are here to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I've just always loved your guys' perspective, on this and the angle that you're taking. And I totally understand what the founding mothers were thinking, but at the same time, this world's changing. And I think, at least, our generation, I think, is adopting some of the nostalgic stuff, and certainly Play was incredibly engaging for me, and to infuse learning into it is huge. Real quick, Maggie, your children, I'm going to put you right on the spot here. how did you introduce your children to diversity? We live in a 90+% Caucasian area, but how did you tackle that issue?
Thank you for asking that. I was fortunate enough to work at GRCC, and obviously that's where I met you, Justin. And so every time I could go to work, it was in a gym at the Ford Field House, and I was able to bring them. And they met some of their best friends there. It ended up being also some of their babysitters. It ended up being with who they still call their uncle. I was able to coach women's basketball and have that privilege there and teach and really bring them along. They were just really those gym rats. And while sometimes I get people who say, oh gosh, can you please, she brings her kids there and they just run all over the place. But that was our open-ended play. I wanted to work, I had to work, and it was just a wonderful opportunity to introduce them to downtown Grand Rapids. And that's actually where I fell in love with Grand Rapids, was through that experience. And then I was able to, okay, so we got through practice, we got through film, we got through all of this, and then we would go to, you know, the local restaurant there and get a bite to eat and try to support the downtown Grand Rapids, which, you know, even back then, which I feel like it was in 1784, it was still not as vibrant as what it is today. So it's only grown. We're very lucky to have that downtown.
Yeah, I think, and I'm sure there's a lot of parents that would echo that just the exposure downtown can help to facilitate that discussion. But you know, you have to be wanting to wrap your arms around it. You have to be eager and interested in incorporating that actively. You have to work at it when you come from an area that is so predominantly white like ours. You have to work at that. It has to be intentional. And so let's help parents that are on this, because this is why they're here, right? They're here because they want to learn, they want these activities. Let's help them, you know, wrap their arms around this a little bit. Maggie, I see your program directors at the Children's Museum as architects. They're creating play. What's the process like early on when you're deciding on an exhibit or activity? How does the Children's Museum intentionally ingrain important pillars such as diversity, socioeconomics into the final product?
Yeah, they are extremely talented. And while it really, really hurts me that we are closed currently right now to protect our community at this point, when we open back up, we promise to be even more brilliant and better than ever before, because we've actually been able to step back and really analyze every single thing that we are doing. But let's talk about what they were doing pre-COVID, and that is filtering through everything. So we would, you know, they sit around tables, we sit around tables and talk about either a subject. And let me just take, like, let me give TCF Bank kudos here. We have their bank in our museum where kids can role play. Well, are you just going to have, you know, dollar bills there? Because not everybody just uses dollar bills. Okay, then let's use other methods of money. You know, is it the pound? Is, you know, it the franc? Is it the, and introducing them to culturally diverse forms of money. And then do the next step forward too. When you mention that socioeconomic portion of that, that's very critical. Are there bridge cards allowed, you know, in the bank? Yes, because that's real. And kids need to learn that and know that, have empathy and understanding. So just the We Bank alone, TCF We Bank, we really try to look at every single angle of a bank so that we can bring in diversity. That's just one example.
That's wonderful. And like I said, I think you know, I see the engineering, the architecture. I've, you know, obviously been there a few times, both with you as a tour, but also, you know, as a patron. And I've always found that the bank in the grocery store setting was really revealing. And then kind of a selfish plug for the Community Foundation. Next year, we're going to be talking about family finance. It's not enough that there's wealth in the community of Ada, Cascade, Forest Hills. I heard an alarming statistic, and I won't share it because I don't want to get it wrong, but of the number of people that are still living paycheck to paycheck, but they live in a nice house, they live in a nice area. And when that's passed down to the next generation, they see that, what kind of impact is that going to have? So I really appreciated seeing, some of those things that are starting to introduce the monetary value and really, to me, not taking things for granted, because, the cost of things is important to analyze and understand, particularly when you're a kid. So share some of your favorite activities, Maggie, if you will. We'll start with you on this one. Share some of your favorite activities that you have had in the last couple of years at the Children's Museum.
Oh man, that's so hard to pick. Probably the most that is most relevant for me is my kids loved forts and they loved trains. And I became really, really involved with the Children's Museum because, of course, I would sometimes leave like work, GRCC, walk over to the Children's Museum, and my kids would just sit there and play at the train table. And in my young brain, and it was unfortunate, I wish I could do this all over again, I kept saying to them, we have a train table. We have trains. Play with something else. Can we go upstairs? Can we do this? And if I had to give some advice to any caregivers or adults in their lives, let them go. Let them play. Let them have that open-ended experience. Because as personally, I'll only speak personally, I'm always harping on them. I'm always do this, do that, pick up the towel, clean this, do that. And in the Children's Museum offers a time where sometimes parents can step back and allow that interaction with kids. I even tell the story about, I have the one kid who, when the other kid comes up who's playing in the Children's Museum and takes the train out of my one child's hand, my one child retaliates. Yeah. And of course, that's when you have to step in as a parent. I'm not saying just let them, duke this out in the Children's Museum. But I also had another child who had a very different personality. And when the kid would come up and take the train out of his hands, then he just went off and got another train. All of that interaction ends up being how we live in our real world. Are you going to allow, that interaction to get out of hand like we see sometimes right now? Or are you going to allow that interaction to just, take place? And we see that right now too. Just let it be. And then the other thing I've got to say too is our Just Fort Fun, which is actually sponsored by one of our board members, Jason Schnelker. He came up with this idea because he loved building forts with his kids. He's like, can't we have just a huge fort section? And those are things that you can do in the Children's Museum, but then you can go home as well and just allow for that open-ended play. Grab as many blankets and pillows as you can and do a beautiful fort with your family. You'll be surprised what your kids can do when you just let them have that open-endedness.
It's one of the amazing bright spots of my day is going home, and I've got a 20-month-old, and he is just figuring some things out, and I just lay on the floor and play. I mean, that's happening for 2 hours every night now, so it's wonderful. Okay, Natalie, how about for you? Some of the activities that you've seen at the Children's Museum that stand out to you?
I would say the fort is a big one, because just the other day, my daughter reminded me about the fort that we built when the shutdown first happened. And she compared it to the Children's Museum. She said, Mom, remember we made that fort and we had a hard time because our fort wasn't great, but it worked. And so she talked about how we built the fort. And she's like, it wasn't like the fort at the Children's Museum, but I love watching the kids play with that. And I also love the collaborative play because children just know how to play. I know we kind of talked about this in our pre-interview. I don't know from my experience if there's a certain rhyme or reason behind how you get children to play with other children. I don't think that race is involved in that. I just believe that children just play, and it's simply that simple. But I would say that for my experience at the Children's Museum, I love to walk through and watch the fort. And personally, I like to play with the bubbles. I know that that's the classic, but there's a lot that I learned in actually working at the museum versus bringing my kids in to play about how to make the right type of bubble and how to link the bubbles. And I'm a firm believer that adults need to play as well. And so it's just a good experience. And a lot of our play facilitators can really show you the cool things that you can do with bubbles. Most of the time, I'm either, in the office or I'm somewhere having a meeting, so I don't get to play as much. But I would say personally, I love the bubbles and trying to get them to link. So I kind of miss that. And I do enjoy just watching the children and hearing the laughter. I often say it has been one of the best places to work because it's just a certain joy that, when you hear the screaming and the tantrums. I'm sorry, I know the parents hate when their kids are having tantrums, but we love to hear the fun and the joy and what the kids are doing. And it's great. Mondays are usually our, it's been so long, I'm almost like, is it Monday that are our days that we're closed? But it's just very quiet in there. And it's almost a certain, it's not a sadness, but we're looking forward to Tuesday when you know that you'll hear the laughter and the screams and the joy and the children and the surprise element that comes with just simply playing. But I would say the fort is everything that I get to experience on the second floor of the Children's Museum. And for me personally, it would be the bubbles.
Forts and bubbles.
Forts and bubbles.
I'm gonna break our outline a little bit because I want to come back to 2021 and let's end with that. But let's now get outside of the museum. You need only walk outside the doors of the museum, and your exposure to things that people in our community in Ada, Cascade, Forest Hills are not going to be generally exposed to. It's literally in the heart of downtown. It overlooks Fulton Division, which divides north, south, east, west. The exposure is plentiful, but I imagine there are a few key places where the two of you feel viewers should be visiting when they come down there. If as they are watching this, if their intention is to expose people to socio-economic differences, to diversity and ethnicity and different cultures, what are the musts, Natalie? Where do you gotta go?
Ooh, there's a lot of good places. And, I've just been downtown for maybe a year now before everything happened. So I would sometimes come back from lunch like, oh my God, there's this place. And, a lot of times they would laugh like, it's been there forever. We know about it. If you go down where the Grand Rapids African American Museum is, that is a great place to visit. There are a lot of amazing small restaurants, small business restaurants that are there. On Division, there's a cool sock spot just to check out and just to shop. Of course, there's also, if you go a little further down, there's the downtown market, which has some great bakery items, restaurants, juice places. I know that there's Mosby's popcorn. And also, speaking of the Grand Rapids African American Museum, We Are Lit, which is a literature bookstore, is now inside of there, and they just had a grand opening. Check out, of course, you have the other downtown cultural institutions, like the Graham and the Public Museum. But I would say, if you just kind of how Maggie mentioned when she would leave and walk over from GRCC and grab a bite to eat, I would encourage, folks that are coming from the suburbs not to just go to the Children's Museum and then go home. Ride up the road and go play at the park, at the zoo. Go find a bite to eat where you can just kind of walk around. Don't make everything necessarily a park and get out and then get back in your car and then go home, because then that becomes a fun check the box. But if you actually take the time to, cross over Division on Fulton, make a left turn, there's tons of restaurants, small businesses.
And there's a lot of opportunities. Kids are naturally inquisitive. Van Andel Institute has a whole education and science section specific to education that tries to introduce the education process through the nature of being inquisitive that is naturally comes to children. And I think what you're saying, Natalie, is that if you just start venturing around down there, you're going to get questions from your children.
Yes.
And that's where the exposure starts to begin. That's where you can start to have that dialogue. And there's plenty of books, YouTube videos, movies, documentaries that are going to help you explain things the right way. But I think without having the exposure to it, you're never going to have, really that direct connection to be able to, elicit an emotional response and remember. Maggie, in our pre-interview, Maggie, you just kind of just said, just come down here. I mean, that was one of your things. Like, you got to come down here. You can't stay in the bubble. We all live in this bubble. We live, in Ada Cascade. We know what that bubble is. I get trapped in it all the time, but you got to come down here. There's people in our community who are apprehensive for a variety of reasons. Safety, they feel like it's more dangerous down there. I can certainly sympathize with the anxiety for people with mental health conditions that have anxiety about getting out of the house. But if you're watching this right now, I think you're open to changing that. And just coming downtown more frequently can be an experience in of itself. Can you share the value in that exposure from your perspective, Maggie?
Yeah, absolutely. It's really, it's the opportunity to help children, understand the social world in which they live, and really gives them a really good look at how real life is. And it's really critical for, and the elephant in the room that I'd love to talk about when we talk about diversity, we should, you brought it up before, Justin, and that was also the socioeconomic diversity aspect of it, and homelessness. There are very, it is prevalent. I know that I'm not going to try to get off from the soapbox of homelessness and how we're going to solve it by any means. All I'm telling you is it's there, and you probably will be approached. And I think that whatever you decide to do as being a caregiver with the youngster you have, talk to them about that.
Yes.
So when you get maybe you have to park 3 blocks away, and maybe before you get out of the car, you can share with them, there are people who do not have homes, and they might approach us for money. This is how we as a family have decided, to answer the homeless person. Whatever way that is, talk to them about it and let them know that this is really a reality, and it's not anything to, turn your head and run away from.
I was going to say, can I speak to that? Because I had that experience with my kids. It was a few years ago. We were living here, but I don't think I had started with the Children's Museum, and we were in Chicago. And I realized, and my friend and I, we met up, and we were both, had lived in Chicago for some time. And so when I took them downtown, because that's where we were going to stay, and we were going to walk Magnificent Mile and have those conversations. And we had those conversations, prior to leaving the hotel, what they could expect to see. And just the amazement and the wonderment that was in their eyes. And I'll never forget my son, when we came back, he said, "You know what, Mom? Actually, some of those guys that were out there, they were just nice. They just needed they just needed help. They weren't as scary as they looked like on TV." And so sometimes we can get so caught in what we see or what we are told to, what the images are that are put out there. And just for my son to actually see in real life, real time, real world, and we had those conversations, like you said, it wasn't some big scary thing of, a homeless person chasing you and attacking you. And I think sometimes those images get put out there and people go, "Oh my God, the city may be scarier than being in the suburbs." But that is important, that conversation alone. So now, my son is the one with the heart of gold and would probably empty out my pocketbook every time we see someone that needs something. But just having that conversation, having that moment, having that real world experience, was enough for him and I to both realize that everyone has a different story and everyone has a different situation. And I appreciated his comment on, it wasn't as scary as I thought it would be. There are people too. They're just, down their luck for whatever reason. So,
yeah. And I appreciate these experiences that you guys are sharing, because it's, it's really important for our viewers to begin to, break through some of these, maybe barriers that they're facing. A lot of them might be coming downtown. The exposure might be something that they're probably desensitized to because they're coming down for a variety of reasons. But maybe they're not going to places that can help introduce other cultures. Natalie, I already asked you this, but Maggie, how about you? What are some locations that you think would be proactive for parents to visit that are going to get the exposure that maybe they want, or spark the kind of conversations with the children that they want?
Center is just a great hub, we feel, in the heart of downtown Grand Rapids. And yes, it does just happen to be around the corner from us. And that's really convenient. And that is where Grandma is too. When Natalie was referring to the African American Museum, and to support our local places is just what we are all about. We are a local business. So all we want to do is also support all the other local businesses around as well. So if you are going to Mezzo, which is just kitty corner from us, to grab the best tacos in the whole world, then also please come over to the Children's Museum. If you happen to be at the Children's Museum and you're feeling like tacos, because the fake tacos in our museum was just not satisfying, then go over to Mezzo and support locally owned businesses and companies. And then, if you're not going right to go to Mezzo when you walk out our doors, you're going left and there's a library right there. We just have so much downtown to help with diversifying and bringing culture like no other that you can find, I feel, in West Michigan.
Absolutely. And I know you have some resources on your website as well. This is something very important to you, to the museum, I'm sure to your board, to your staff. What's your website? Where can they visit this? How can they find out more information? What a great tool.
Thank you. www.grcm.org is our amazing website. And this is kudos to our team, because they're the ones who came up with all of this, how to talk about race with your child. And it's a very different conversation than talking it about with adults, like what we're having. When you're talking with children, you have to be careful with the words that you're using, and also structure it maybe in a very different way than you would with the conversations like with you, Justin, right now. So I really hope that you'll take a look at that section of our website. But there's also, do you want to have some sensory play at home right now? Because I know you're stuck at home. So why don't you go on and look and see how to create, cloud Play-Doh, or how to create slime, or how to do something that it just uses simple tools in your kitchen that can create that amazing sensory play. So everything from talking about race to sensory play, it's on our website.
Wonderful. There's such amazing resources that you guys are, and for you to be actively providing additional resources. Just a reminder, folks that are watching, if you haven't seen it already, you can watch episode number 2, which is with Kent District Library. We had them on to introduce 3 amazing books that can help to introduce diversity to your children. So I'd encourage you to watch that. You can also get those on our website, CascadeCommunityFoundation.com. I almost cited your website.
That's all right.
Citing there incorrectly, but okay. Well, thank you so much. I'm going to get back to one question here quickly. What can we be on the lookout for 2021? Assuming doors are going to open back up, what are people going to see when they walk through the doors that they may not have seen before?
I think that we always have to look at the silver lining of everything. Our doors are closed right now, and it's very, very hard. We've lost 3/4 of our staff. That's the most miserable thing ever to go through. And there's so many people out there who can empathize because they're going through this as well. But the silver lining, which you have to do, you can never let a good crisis go to waste, as they say, is we are able to pause. We are able to rethink and redo things like you could never do. When you're open, we have almost 200,000 people who go through our doors every year. That's a lot of people. Think about 200,000 people going through your house. You always need, you need new carpeting, you need fresh paint, you need to upgrade your couch. You need to, that's what we're doing right now. Not to mention, we're adding all of the critical PPE that all businesses need. We're redoing the front entrance so that it can be more COVID friendly. And I know that even though everyone's saying, well, then maybe when you get open though, COVID's gonna be gone. No, that's not how we're looking at it. We're looking at it as, but we'll still always have the influenza. We'll still always have this. We'll always have this. We'll always have this. So how can we make it as safe and healthy as possible for every single person who walks through our door? And we have this time to do that. And what a gift.
Well, I mean, you're hearing it from Natalie Hall and Maggie Lancaster, right from them. Grand Rapids Children's Museum is making the changes necessary. They're proactively making some changes at the museum to be safer, be cleaner. I think those are incredibly important things. I think there's a lot of businesses that are going to be making the same adjustments. I know my pediatrician that I was visiting, my son was doing the same thing. I think that's really important work. I think the world is not going to be back to the way it was ever again. I think we're always going to be cognizant of this threat that's out there. I want to thank you both so much for joining us. It's been so rewarding for us to be able to talk to experts in different fields that can help parents, achieve their goals in introducing diversity to their children. We're going to be moving on to mental health after this, and then other topics. And so anything, before I let you go, anything that we've missed, anything else that you want to say, Natalie, Maggie?
I'll just jump in real quick and say thank you. Natalie hit this perfectly at the beginning. She was kind of like, oh, people in Ada Cascade are going to have a conversation, And Justin, that's what you're doing. That's what you're creating. And that's all we can ask for. And thank you for doing it in a safe way, where I feel like I can be vulnerable and say things that, might make people feel uncomfortable, but we feel safe. So great job. Kudos to the foundation, and just thanks for all the work that you're doing.
Our pleasure. Natalie, anything else you want to add?
No, I'll just piggyback off what Maggie said. Kudos. I mean, I think that, this is great. And I really hope that the community sees it as value added and necessary to do the work. We all have work to do in areas of our lives. And I just think this is a wonderful opportunity. Thank you for bringing us on to talk about play. And I just really hope that the community listens and that we hear and that we just work to be better together.
Yeah, you bet. Well, once again, thank you so much for joining us. The Grand Rapids Children's Museum, downtown Grand Rapids. If you're looking for exposure, if you're looking to begin introducing different cultures, ethnicity, diversity to your children, heed Maggie Lancaster's words. Just come down here. A little housekeeping. Again, we want to thank United Bank for underwriting this episode. We also have some additional sponsors that have been a part of this for us. So let's throw up a sponsorship slide. Envia, Environments for Health, and HR Collaborative. We're going to be speaking to both of these amazing businesses later in 2021. NanoBioProtect. This is a great product if you're looking for something, an antiseptic for your nasal cavity, as odd as you may think that sounds. What an amazing feat of ingenuity. So check out NanoBioProtect, of course, Ellie Fry Zago and Chad Zago for their sponsorship support, and once again, United Bank as well. So let's finish with this. This series that we started has been, really critical because it relies on our annual partners and those that have supported us throughout the year. This series that we started a few months back has given us an opportunity to present a vehicle, a platform of non-confrontation, no judgment. It's just all passion. It's just all expertise for those that have something to say about diversity. And I'm just going to kind of echo some things that Natalie and Maggie said, because there's a lot of conversations, there's a lot of investment going into the urban core, as there should be, dealing with diversity, dealing with socioeconomic issues, dealing with privilege, dealing with lack of resources and access. We're obligated to have conversations in Forest Hills, Cascade, Ada, as the community foundation that serves that area. It's our obligation to serve the residents' homes, businesses, nonprofits, churches in that area. That's what we're doing here. And we find it critically important to be having important conversations like this on that side of things too. We're only going to be able to come together if all of us are having conversations about these topics, no matter what walk of life you come from, no matter what your wealth might be, no matter how many kids you might have, whether you have kids or not. These are important conversations to have. If you're looking to spark some dialogue in this area, please get a hold of us. You can find me at justin.swan@cascadecommunityfoundation.com. You can find us on our website, cascadecommunityfoundation.com. We are all over social media. Contact us, 616-499-2060. Let us know questions you might have. Let us know other topics. We want to hear those things from you. With that said, coming up in 2021, really, really important conversation around mental health that we are just finishing up some amazing partners. We do have room for additional sponsors. If mental health is important to you, if it's important to where you work, we need to hear from you to have more conversation about that. If you want to be an annual partner, let us know. Go on our website, find us. We have a bunch of opportunity, a bunch of benefits that our annual partners receive from us. And you can see we've got a lot of them, and we love to support those that support us. We need to hear more from you if you've got more to say. Check us out in 2021, probably coming in January, February, Isolated. It's a very, very deep conversation with people who are directly impacted during this pandemic with mental health episodes, mental illness that's really driving them to a place that they don't want their mind to be. They're going to share their experiences with us, and they're going to be very familiar to you. It's going to look like your neighbor. Maybe it is your neighbor. Maybe it's you. And we need to hear from you. So if you're interested in sharing your story about mental health, we want to hear about that. Justin.Swan@CascadeCommunityFoundation.com. I want to thank our board of directors for giving us the flexibility to have these conversations that are very important. And once again, check out the community Q&A live stream coming at you again in 2021.